Hello, everybody. Welcome to our Fantasy World Write-In. So good to see so many of you here today. Just if you are a normal write-in visitor, today is actually an extra special write-in because we are having folks who are also part of Fantasy Writers Week. So we have some folks who come to our monthly write-ins every single month here. We have some folks who are here from Fantasy Writers Week, and we have some folks who do both. So I am so excited to be here with you today. Just a couple quick things of housekeeping. Hey, Andrew, a couple quick pieces of housekeeping from Fantasy Writers Week. If you would like to participate in Fantasy Writers Week, if you are a write-in folks, if one of the write-in folks and haven't come yet, you can go to go.prowritingaid.com/fantasy to sign up. It's not too late. And then if you are here for Fantasy Writers Week and you are interested in joining us for our Thursday sessions and getting unlimited access to our replays, as a quick reminder, we are doing a 40% off ProWritingAid yearly or lifetime here this week. So I've just dropped that link in the chat, and I will drop it a couple more times today. And as a reminder, you will also find the slides and replays from this event up on the Fantasy Writers Week Hub, which I have just put in the chat as well. We actually have the first two sessions from today already up there, our short welcome session, and then the session with Rochelle and Anne that just happened, which is always so fantastic. So please go check those out. And again, if you are interested in joining us for Thursday or just snagging 40% off ProWritingAid, feel free to use that offer link I've dropped. Okay, that takes care of all the housekeeping. We will just go ahead and jump into this write-in. So, excuse me, today we are talking about how to build a fantasy world in this write-in. If you have not been in a write-in with us before, these are a slightly different type of session than every other session that we do at ProWritingAid and that we're going to do during Fantasy Writers Week. For this, we are going to be working through short prompts, which cover basically different kind of aspects of world building. So I'll do a little bit of teaching here, and then we'll go into the prompts. When we get to the prompt section, we will each have a timer, or we will all look at a timer to kind of go through these prompts on our own, and then you will be able to share them in the chat for everyone else to see. So I'll give you more information on that when we get to that section. I just want to check and see what is in the chat. Okay, yeah, you might have to refresh the hub page. Sometimes dropping links in Zoom is a little bit challenging. So if you just go to prowritingaid.com/fantasy week hub, it might help a little bit because clicking from Zoom's chat can always be challenging. And that link always gets you to all of the replays. So I know a couple folks have asked how to get to those. That is where you go, prowritingaid.com/fantasy week hub. You should be able to get everything there. So yeah, as a couple folks have said, if the link in the chat is taking you a little bit to get through, just click it twice or refresh it and it'll work. Sorry, the mechanism from Zoom chat is always a little challenging. And I know a couple folks have asked questions in the Q&A about ProWritingAid. We're going to go into depth on that on my next session, which starts at 4 p.m. So this session, we'll talk all about fantasy world building and we'll work through some prompts together. And during the next session, we will go into depth on PWA. All right, let's go ahead and get started. So for those of you who did not meet me at the first session, my name is Haley. I'm the head of education at ProWritingAid. It's so good to see all of you. And today we're going to be talking about world building, and all of the prompts that we are working on are related to world building. So why world building? Why is this what we're doing as our prompts? Basically, when done right, world building creates a living and breathing environment for your story that can feel just as real as the world we actually live in. And I think this is many people's favorite things about the fantasy genre. I mean, I know for myself, as a kid growing up, I was about the same age as Harry, Ron, and Hermione as they were going through Hogwarts. And so I remember turning 11 and really being like, maybe I will get a letter to go to Hogwarts. that world was so real for me. And as an adult engaging with fantasy, the worlds are still so real to me. And I think that's one of the reasons why I love fantasy so much and why so many readers and consumers of fantasy material, whether that is books or television shows or movies or anything like that just love that so much because the world just feels so real to them. I'd love to hear in the chat, what are some of your favorite fantasy worlds? Are there any worlds that you would like absolutely love to live in? And I'm also curious if folks prefer worlds like the worlds of Harry Potter, which is kind of magical realism, more in this world, or something that's kind of more high fantasy. Oh, I see someone says Grishaverse. I would love, Leigh Bardugo is one of my favorite authors. You'll probably hear me mention her a lot, and you can probably see I have 1 million copies, and I think 3 different copies of the Six of Crows duology behind me. Earthsea is a great one. No, Middle Earth is not old at all. Middle Earth is amazing. See some Crescent City fans. House of Sky and Breath was crazy. Hogwarts as well. His Dark Materials by Pullman. Yeah, all of these worlds are so fantastic. And we can see here just a wide range. Oz, yeah, Chronicles of Narnia, Middle Earth. Yeah, I mean, all of these worlds are so fantastic. And I can guarantee that every single world that everyone is listing here, we can all kind of see it and we can all feel it. Let me just see. I'm just seeing that there's an issue in Zoom. Let me just tell them to direct them back. Okay, I have just directed everyone back to the link, and we're also streaming in Facebook, so hopefully everybody should be able to get it. And let me just grab this link and send it to my team so they can send it over to everyone. Okay, great. So all of these worlds are so exciting. Oh, Star Trek is great. I would also live in Star Wars, and like I wanted to be a Jedi very badly. So as a fiction writer, whether again you're writing novels, whether you are writing movies, TV shows, etc., creating and constructing a believable and multi-layered world is one of the kind of foremost pieces of who we are. If you're not paying enough attention to world building, particularly if you're writing fantasy, your story can come across as implausible or boring. Again, it's important to think as fantasy writers that we don't just need to create worlds that are engaging, we also need to create worlds that are realistic. Even if the things in those worlds are happening and they're like implausible, right? We need to make sure that they make sense within the system of the world itself. So I sadly cannot be a Jedi, but like there's a lot of rules that govern who can be a Jedi and what it means to be a Jedi. And so as a consumer of Jedi content, I can engage with all of that. So there are things that like, ring as plausible or true within the world of Star Wars, even as those are not plausible or true in my world. And I'm not going to get too far into that with Star Wars because I don't want to start a Star Wars war in the comments. But all of that being said, it's really important for us as writers to consider fantasy. So let's look at a couple different examples of fantasy worlds. All of these have been mentioned already in the chat, but I just want to take a quick look at these to kind of spark our inspiration as we go into some of our writing prompts. So I'm going to start off with Narnia. As I mentioned on the welcome session, I really think Narnia is probably one of the most impactful, if not the most impactful, for my love of fantasy to this day in my 30s. So Narnia is an epic world. It's full of fantastic creatures and fierce battles between good and evil. Very similarly to Middle Earth, Narnia has kind of risen above the fantasy genre to become almost a world in itself. I think some of the ones that we have discussed in the chat are worlds that like we just all can know and picture. I think Narnia, Westeros, which is another one we'll talk about, Middle Earth, and then obviously the world for Harry Potter as well. They just feel so real that they almost are just worlds of themselves. I mean, clearly, folks study the languages of Middle Earth, right, and can get college degrees in those. So Narnia is a world where magic meets reality. It's one that has drawn in young and old folks for decades and decades. I think one of the interesting things to take away from this as you are thinking about what to create for your world is the moral theme of Narnia. So there's a really there's a really kind of strong moral theme that runs through the books of Narnia, and that plays out in the world itself. So that's one thing to think about, is like, is there this kind of goal, or is there a conflict between good and evil? And what does that mean? What kind of battleground could that conflict play out for? And sorry for all of you who are having some issues getting in. We will be posting the full replays. I'm not quite sure what's going on, but I'll take a look at Zoom again after we finish this. Okay, another world that we can get inspiration from is Westeros. So people of all around the world know and love Westeros, almost like it's their own world. And I think Westeros is an example of a fantasy world that has really transcended the boundaries of even just fantasy, I feel. And, you know, similarly to something like Harry Potter, where folks are all just kind of really enveloped and intrigued by this world. And I think what's interesting is that Westeros feels very real. And one of the reasons that it feels super real, I think it's because of George R.R. Martin's grounding in history, and how he's taken inspiration from history to set up the rules of this world, but mainly the politics as well. So I think that's another thing that's really curious to keep in mind as you're going about doing your own world building. Are there historical periods that you are very inspired by, that you could bring into your own writing? Leigh Bardugo is another one who does that. The Grisha verse is often inspired by, I believe, like, you know, the late 19th and early 20th century, like Amsterdam and stuff like that. So I think there's a bunch of different issues. Okay. So I'm just checking the chat. I know a lot of people are having issues coming in. We're trying with Zoom. Unfortunately, we can't do a ton, but I will. Oh, Allison, I'm so sorry about that. So for everyone who is having an issue with getting in, so sorry about that. We'll check on the Zoom settings again as soon as I am out there. Okay. Let's keep going. Our next world, another world that I just wanted to talk about, is Lunathian. So some of you folks are fans of Crescent City. I think some folks have read the most recent book, which no spoilers in the chat. But I think it's important to remember, again, as we go into our prompts, that fantasy worlds don't just have to be worlds based in the past, or worlds that don't look anything like our world, right? The newest world at the center of Sarah Maas's newest series has a lot of fantastical elements like different creatures. You know, people have swords and magic powers, and there are fae and angels and all of those types of creatures, but it also happens in a very modern setting, right? So folks are texting each other, they're on computers, they're searching the internet, all of this type of stuff. And so all of this goes to show that your world, a fantasy world that you build, can be many different things. It can be something that is grounded in history. It can be something that is grounded in a moral lesson. It can be something that's grounded in real life, which we then create from. So with all of this inspiration in mind, we are going to move to the prompt type part of this session. So here's what's going to happen. We are going to work through 4 prompts, which will cascade in different levels of difficulty and different amounts of time. So for each prompt, I'm going to read the prompt to you, and you will have a certain amount of time to work on that specific prompt. You can take the full time, you can take more time, you can, you know, if you're really just inspired on something else fantasy writing, I won't be offended. You can go right on that. But I will give you the prompt. You'll have a set amount of time to work through the prompt. And then after the prompt is over, you can drop your thoughts on the prompt, either what you've written or reflections on what you've written, into the chat. You also do not have to do that. So if you don't feel comfortable sharing, you do not need to. But if you would like to share, please feel free to drop it in the chat. And if you would like everyone to see it, make sure that you select everyone from the drop-down menu so that everyone can see that. Otherwise, I am just the one to see it. All right, so let's go to our first prompt. Our first prompt is a quick exercise where you will describe your novel's world in 50 words or less. So you're going to have 5 minutes. Again, first quick exercise, describe your novel's world in 50 words or less. I'm going to start the timer. Again, when you're done, if you would like, you can drop your description into the chat. Remember, 50 words or less. Try to be brief. Okay, time is up. So you can go ahead and drop your world into the chat. I'm also looking at the one on Facebook. So those of you who are watching in the Facebook Live, I'm checking those out as well. So overall, I just wanted to laugh at Richard. Richard sent some of his through the Q&A, and one the Q&A that came through second, Richard, the first one I saw was just trees, which made me laugh. I saw the rest of it as well, but that gave me a chuckle. Okay. So we have some really fantastic worlds here, and I was watching all of them come through. So in the Facebook group, we have one from Vanessa, who's doing something that is inspired by Imperial Brazil in terms of architecture and clothing, with a strong religious and spiritual foundation, which sounds really fantastic. And like we discussed with Westeros, it can be really helpful to have a real world inspiration for when you are creating your world. So that's amazing. Ian has a world where there's 23 hours of night and 3 hours of day, and only female characters can use magic. So those rules are really going to be effective as you're starting to create conflict and think about how different worlds are challenging, right? And different worlds can create conflict in them. Let's see some of the other ones we have. Okay. So Jennifer has a world that is modern, prehistoric, some blood and guts in there, mystic caves and cultures with absolutely beautiful grounds, good, bad, and great characters. And there's a portal from a 12-year-old girl's house that leads to another world, which sounds to me like it could be almost the inciting incident for what you're happening if the girl runs through that, goes through that portal. Okay, let's see. T has a collection of human-settled high-tech worlds whose governments are organized into a feudal-style kingdom. While these planets are connected by jump routes, the long-range gate network that would provide links to the rest of the human-settled space was blockaded hundreds of years ago by a more powerful alien foe. So that is, again, we can already see how the world building both creates this really kind of believable space for the characters to be interacting with, but then also can start to create the conflict as well. Okay, let's see what else we have. We have Richard's trees. Richard is, in addition to the trees, has emerald green forests, ancient standing stones, and druids cultivating plants and trees, which sounds just like a beautiful place that I want to go to. Okay, let's look. I'll look through a couple more. There's so many great ones in here. I'm unfortunately not going to have a chance to read through all of them live. Okay, Andrew has an underground cave system organized around a camphor distillery. The caves are inhabited by several groups that sometimes conflict. Glow sticks and glitter bombs are used as weapons. On the surface, there's a fortress guarded by archers. The Ministry of Ambience have waged war and are trying to introduce gender. Very fascinating. Okay, we have a few more folks in the Facebook group. PJ Lightning has 2 large continents. Wraith with small kingdoms protected by a race of magic users. Wraith is feudal, religious-based, and mostly low-tech. And then Kandor, apologies if I'm mispronouncing anything, has 2 huge nations, one that is based on Norse and Viking culture, and the other is unknown at this time. And then there's also Xiantu, apologies, PJ, if I'm mispronouncing this, which has folks who are magic users and enemies of all. Really, really great. Okay, let's see. Let's see if we have a couple more, and then we'll go on to our next prompts. Eden's world is matriarchal, a Bronze Age society with villages huddled on remote hill forts, separated by moors and forest, but connected by rivers. Men can stay in the autumn, but must leave in the spring. Magic is the realm of an order of transgender, non-binary druids. And then we'll go to something very kind of post-apocalyptic. So Crime says post-apocalyptic 2025 with an 1880 aesthetic. Very cool. Countries are more like city-states. And in this particular city-state, religions live in harmony, but the land between states is dangerous. A few real physics exist, or psychics, excuse me. Corruption at the top is rift, but well covered. So I really think it's so fascinating to just see how many fantastic, amazing worlds that everyone is coming up with and sharing. There are just so many different ways. And again, what's really interesting to me is that we can see different writers in these prompts approaching world building differently. So some are approaching it by thinking about large scale magic systems, and some are kind of going into it from a more micro look at what a particular character is doing and how a particular character is approaching this world. So that's one of the things that I want to emphasize both on this session and then throughout the week, is that there are many different ways to approach writing and many different ways to unlock your world. You might have a picture of a world and then imagine conflict within that world, or you might start with pictures of characters and then build the world around them. Neither way is better or worse. Having all of those kind of different options is really effective for everyone. And again, will work differently for different writers. So those of you in the Facebook chat, I just wanted to say, I saw a number of people in the Facebook chat are still having a bit of issues getting in. No worries. I am checking out all of the comments in Facebook as well. So I can see comments both on the Facebook group and in the Zoom chat. No worries either way. And Jeffrey, no, we're not going to grade everything. It is all, everybody gets an A+ if you're participating today. So no grades coming. Okay, so that was our first prompt. Let's move on to prompt number 2. So our second prompt is to make a map for your world. Now this one is going to be hard to put into the chat. So we're just going to have to do our best to envision it. You can kind of describe it if you would like. But it's okay if your map looks rough, or if you are not a very artistic person. I am not. You can either draw the map yourself or use an online map maker. There are a number of free resources around the internet. If you're looking for a good map maker, you can try a free account on something like Word Spinner, which I will put a link into the chat so that you can see. Incarnate is also great and free. There's tons of different ones, or you can draw with pen and paper. So if you already have a map, which I see a number of people in the chat do, you can add more details to that, or you can continue to work on the description of your map as well. So, or of your world that we just focused on. So again, you can either make it yourself from scratch if you're starting, you can add more detail to it if you already have the start of a map, or if you feel very comfortable with your map as it is, you can continue to work on the description of your world. So we'll have 7 minutes for this. A couple of people have said they already have maps done. If you want to drop a link to that, like Jessica has in the chat on her Instagram, you can go ahead and drop a link to your map. Otherwise, you can just describe it. So we'll do 7 minutes for this one, starting now. And just FYI, if you have a map and you would like to upload it and drop either a Google Drive link or some of the like Incarnate links, or even your own specific links like some folks are doing in the chat, I will try to share some of them once our time is up. So you can feel free to upload as a JPEG or a screenshot to Google Drive or something like that and share the link, or you can upload something like Incarnate as well. And I think I saw someone in the chat asking for map making links. So try World Spinner or the links that people are dropping, Incarnate, that if you just go to incarnate.com, you should also be able to create a map from that. For those of you who are done, I think it was Brittany asked a great question in the chat, which is, do you find that building your map as you go helps, or do you design the map first and then go from there? So feel free to answer that question again as you are finishing up. And then I've been collecting these links to take a look at. All right, just as our time finishes, I want to just share a few things, a few of the different perspectives on map making. So Saya says, I like doing the map first because it inspires so much of world building. I can easily look at a place and go, these resources are precious and scarce. I bet people fight over them. Or this place is highly defensible. Which warlord built their fortress there? So that helps, it sounds like, inspire plot for Saya. Whereas other folks have said, I don't even really think about the map until later, right? So all of these ideas are totally valid because everybody has their own different process. So Lily usually builds the basics and then works in details later and likes to explore areas alongside the characters. Jeff agrees with Lily. Johnny is also making the world as the story progresses. Okay, let's see. So yeah, again, lots of different perspectives on this. All right, okay. I'm going to pull up some of the maps that we have. So let's see. First, we have, I believe this one was shared by PJ in the Facebook group and in the chat here. Just pause this timer. So we can see from this map that I think it was PJ who shared this, that we have just a ton of different landscapes. So we've got water, looks like there's some kind of arid land over here, as well as snow, a lot of different mountain ranges. And you can again kind of see how, with these lands being separated from each other, and then, with the different geographies, how that could create conflict for everyone. Let's see, we have this land from Black Cara, shared by Minerva. I think you have a different name here in the chat, so apologies if I am missing your name on these. But we've got, again, a much smaller version of a land, which still is kind of giving examples of things where, characters might be engaging. And then also you can see like different kind of places and different notable areas here, right? And you can think about how the characters who are kind of transversing this map would go from one place to another. Let's see what else we have. I think this is, and again, I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing anyone's name, but I think this was Jets. So we have a map here with different towns all around. We can see the orientation of the compass over here. And again, you can kind of see we've got like, it looks like almost an underground world here. Some kind of smaller settlement villages, something that looks like it's surrounded by a wall over here. So they could potentially have, you can think about what would be the reasoning for this particular town to be surrounded by a wall. How does that engage with, so it's, the kind of underground world, exactly. So we have so many different kind of areas here. Here, I know some folks have been asking, it's a canyon, gotcha. So there's this is the canyon surrounding this town over here. Okay, then we have a map from World Anvil, which you can see. If anybody plays like Dungeons and Dragons or any of the RPG games, World Anvil often has maps that look very similar to that, because a lot of people who play D&D or use or play RPG games will use World Anvil for that as well. So you will have you will tend to have, I think, a little bit more detailed of maps because of that functionality. If you're playing D&D, you always have these like really in-depth maps that you can zoom into. So we've got lots of different options here. We've got an arena, we've got a ton of different districts, and you can see also in here that there have been some specific information added to this. We will be doing a walkthrough of the World Anvil software with the World Anvil founders later this week. So you'll learn all about World Anvil there, but it's really great for world building and for creating resources like this. So lots of things that are useful there. So we took a look at a couple of handmade maps. I do want to look at an Incarnate one, since some folks were using Incarnate as well. So you can see Incarnate is obviously a similar, we looked at this, which was Incarnate too. So you can see Incarnate is not quite as like detailed in terms of the city as the one from World Anvil was, but you can create, and you can do this in both, but you can create the really big kind of worlds and look at things like mountain ranges and cities and all of these different places to go through. So I really find map making fascinating. It definitely is not a place that I start with, but it can really create sources of conflict and also just help you think through your world as well. Oh, awesome, Gilly, you stopped for the Incarnate too. And then here we have a map where we are adapting, obviously, like an existing map, adapting the existing kind of United States of America and Canada into, or all of North America actually, into different worlds, right? And we can see similarly, you can think about this as something like the Hunger Games, right? Where there was different regions that have adapted an existing map. So we have something very similar here where we have different domes that are happening within a map that we know well, and we can see these kind of boundaries for the peoples in there. So many different options for maps, so many different options for map making. There's tons of different map making software. I would really encourage you to check those out and to just have fun with that. It can be a really fun way to spur some inspiration and to focus on something that will help your novel without actually writing if you need a little bit of a break. Okay, let's move on to our third prompt. So our third prompt is going to take us into the origin story of our world. And this might be the one this might be our final prompt for today so that we have time to get off before the networking event. But for this prompt, you are going to write the origin story of your world. Now, this is the story of how your world and all the creatures in it came to be. You can choose to write a more scientific story, or you can create a more mythological story. You can choose to focus more on the specifics of the world, or you could choose to focus more on the conflicts between different creatures and characters and that type of thing. It's really up to you. I want to give you a lot of flexibility for this, but think through think through the origin and kind of some of the foundational myths or conflicts that exist between different species or between the world and the species that inhabit it. So some of the questions that came in the chat, some people said, should it be a whole story or an explanation? It's totally up to you. If you have a story in which a myth might actually figure into it, you could try to write it like a story. If you want to just write an explanation, you can also do that. Either one is okay. If you have only thought a little bit about this, here's the time. We have 10 minutes to just kind of brainstorm on it and think a little bit about where it can come from. Again, I would suggest that you think through, if you're really stuck, think through origin stories that you're interested in, think through periods of time in history that are fascinating to you. You could also borrow inspiration from existing myths and legends that you know very well. But again, this is our longest prompt. We have about 10 minutes to just kind of think through this and go through that. And then someone asked a great question about conflicting narratives. That could be something that you talk about in this. If you go more in the area of explanations, you could talk about how different groups have different origin stories, which causes sources of conflict. So lots of different options here. So 10 minutes, we will start now. Good luck, everyone. Okay, that time went very quickly. I was trying to read through all of the amazing posts that came in. There are just so many good ones. I really love myths and origin stories, and so getting to read like 300 right now is is overwhelming. So some from the Facebook group. Let's see. We had Ian. I was just looking at Ian's. Oh my gosh, now they've all gone away. Come on, Facebook, expand. All right, I'll come back to Zoom and then I'll go back to Facebook. Okay, so let's see what we have. Bria says, long, long ago, all the worlds of the blank system lived in harmony under the blank. She was a wise and benevolent ruler, and all the worlds flourished under her leadership. But there were some who resented life under the rule of a female and plotted to overthrow her. In one bloody and painful night, Blank and her whole family were wiped from the galaxy, or so they thought. There is a prophecy that her heir will one day return and restore order to the system and bring back the prosperity of before. Centuries have passed since this night of terror. Some worlds, many of the ones who follow a more scientific or militaristic way of life, scoff at the prophecy and question if Blank even existed or if she was just a legend. Other worlds, worlds where magic and psychic abilities run in tune with nature, know that with all legends there is a germ of truth. So really, really fascinating. Again, we can see similarly to how we were thinking about the world building, right? When you're thinking about your world and when you're thinking about the origin stories, those, even though they might not directly be related to your plot, are often very useful for thinking about conflict, for thinking about how different groups of people are engaging with each other. And again, just really, really helpful for setting all of that up and for thinking through it. It can be really, really a really useful exercise to go through. Okay. I unfortunately don't have time to read through all of these because we have our networking event starting in just 5 minutes. So I'm going to save the chat from this and I will upload it to the hub so that everyone can read through all of the different amazing prompts that have been put up. And then I will put the slide deck up there as well so you can see these prompts in the next one to check out. I want to go through just a couple quick bits of housekeeping that some people have asked for. So our networking event that is coming up in just 5 minutes is Fantasy Writer Speed Dating. It's not actually setting up anyone up on dates. You don't have to be in a relationship or single or anything like that to go to it. It is just an opportunity to go and just connect with different groups of fantasy writers. So go to the hub and click the networking event link to launch that, and you will be taken to that. We have a session at 4 p.m. Eastern on how to use ProWritingAid that I will be leading. Please go back to the hub and refresh the page. I'm having to swap out the button. It's like a complicated Zoom thing, but I'm having to swap out the button for the link, which is why I think some folks were having trouble going in. So right at 4 p.m. as you go into the ProWritingAid session, refresh the page, open that link, and make sure that you are on something that says Fantasy Writers Week webinars. If you're on a webinar link that says ProWritingAid Write-In, you need to refresh again. So I'll make sure to drop that in the Facebook group so that everybody has that announcement and can see the proper link. But again, just the best way to do it is just to refresh at 4 and make sure you're opening the webinar group. So head over to the networking event to hang out with Michelle and meet other fantasy writers. See you at 4 p.m. To talk about ProWritingAid. And if anyone was having any issues with their license, I think some people asked about how to join for get the 40% off. I'm going to drop that link again. And then if you have any questions, just email hello@prowritingaid.com and they will be sure to take care of you. So thank you all so much. This is so inspiring. And I will see you all very soon. Have a great time at the networking event.